I'm 67 years old. I've never written anything longer than a work memo, but my therapist said it might help. To write it all down, to try to understand whether what I did was right. It's been 3 years since that day in court, and I still don't know the answer. My name is David Morrow, and this is the story of how I destroyed my family while trying to save it. My son Nathan was born in 1985, the same year I was promoted to senior engineer at Morrison and Associates. I remember the call from my wife Patricia right in the middle of a site inspection. "A boy," she said through tears. I promised to be there in 2 hours. I arrived in 4. There was a problem with a concrete pour. That pretty accurately describes Nathan's childhood. I was physically present, but emotionally absent. We lived in a nice neighborhood. The boy had good schools. But the first steps, the first word, Little League games. I missed all of it. Eventually, Nathan stopped asking if I would come. He just assumed I wouldn't. Nathan grew up to be a better man than me. This isn't false modesty, just a fact. He became a pediatric physical therapist, makes pennies compared to my income, but every day he helps children learn to walk again after injuries and surgeries. I built bridges that will outlast me by 100 years, but I'm not sure I ever made someone's life better the way Nathan does every week. He met Rachel in college. She was studying special education. They were perfect for each other, both with enormous hearts, both wanting to help people, both dreaming of children, lots of children. Rachel used to joke that she wanted a whole basketball team. They got married in 2010. Nathan was 25, Rachel 28. Young, healthy, in love. They thought it would be easy. It wasn't. The first miscarriage happened in 2011. Rachel was 8 weeks along. Nathan called at 2 in the morning, and I could barely make out words through the sobbing. I drove to their apartment and sat with him in the car for 3 hours while Rachel slept upstairs under sedatives. "These things happen," I said, "because that's what everyone says. You're young. You'll try again." They tried again and again and again. Between 2011 and 2018, Rachel had 6 miscarriages. 6. I watched my daughter-in-law transform from a bright, optimistic woman into someone who flinched at the sight of pregnant women on the street. I watched my son age 10 years and 7. I watched their marriage crack under the weight of grief. They did IVF. 3 rounds. The first 2 failed completely. The third worked. Rachel got pregnant and made it to 14 weeks, longer than ever before. Patricia bought yarn and started knitting a baby blanket. I caught myself looking at cribs online. Then Rachel started bleeding at work. By the time she got to the hospital, it was over. The doctor, a woman my age with kind eyes, explained to them that Rachel's uterus was scarred from the multiple miscarriages. The chances of carrying a baby to term were virtually 0. That night, Nathan called me. This time he wasn't crying. His voice was flat, empty. "It's over, Dad. We can't have children." "What about adoption?" I asked. "Rachel can't. She says she couldn't raise someone else's biological child after losing so many of her own. I know it sounds selfish, but she can't. And honestly, neither can I." They separated for 3 months after that. Unofficially, Nathan just moved in with us, slept in his childhood bedroom, went to work like a ghost, came home, ate dinner in silence, fell asleep. And then, 2 months in, Nathan came downstairs at midnight. I was still awake, watching a documentary about bridge collapses. It's what engineers do when they want to learn from others' mistakes. Nathan sat down next to me, was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, There's another option. Surrogacy. The next 6 months were consumed by research. Nathan and Rachel reconciled, moved back in together, and threw themselves into studying surrogacy. They joined online forums, consulted with lawyers and fertility clinics. I learned a lot during that time, that there are 2 types of surrogacy, traditional and gestational. In traditional surrogacy, the surrogate uses her own egg, meaning she's genetically related to the child. In gestational surrogacy, the intended parents are the biological parents, and the surrogate merely carries the baby. Nathan and Rachel wanted gestational. The child would be theirs, genetically. That in Ohio, where we live, surrogacy laws are murky, contracts are enforceable, but there have been cases where things went wrong. When surrogates changed their minds, when intended parents changed their minds, when everyone ended up in court, that it costs between $100,000 and $200,000, including agency fees, legal costs, medical expenses, and surrogate compensation. Nathan and Rachel had savings, but not enough. Patricia and I offered to help. We'd been saving for retirement, had a decent nest egg. What else do you save for if not for your children and grandchildren? Nathan refused at first, said he couldn't take our money. I told him it wasn't taking, it was investing. In the future of our family, he cried when he finally agreed. They decided not to use an agency. Agencies are expensive, and they create a buffer between intended parents and the surrogate. Nathan and Rachel wanted to find someone themselves, someone they could get to know, someone they could trust. Now, I'm not sure whether that was a mistake. Could things have turned out differently with an agency? Maybe. Or maybe we would have ended up in the same place, just with more lawyers and less personal connection. They posted on surrogacy forums, reached out to people they knew. Rachel's sister offered to help, but she had her own health issues. A college friend of Rachel's expressed interest, but then backed out. Her husband objected. And then, in March 2019, they found Megan. I remember the first time they mentioned her name. Sunday dinner at our house, a tradition we'd maintained since Nathan was a teenager. Patricia had made her famous pot roast. Nathan was looking at his phone. "I think we found someone," he said, looking up from the screen. "Her name is Megan Lawson. She's 32, lives about an hour from here. She's done this before." "Done what?" Patricia asked. "Been a surrogate. Carried a baby for another couple 2 years ago. Everything went smoothly. Those people gave her a glowing recommendation." "Why does she want to do it again?" I asked. Nathan hesitated. "She needs the money. Her older son has a medical condition, some rare autoimmune disease. Treatment isn't fully covered by insurance. She's a single mother, works as a dental assistant. Struggling." Something about this made me uncomfortable. I couldn't pinpoint it then, but looking back, I think I already sensed the fundamental problem with the whole arrangement. This wasn't an equal transaction between equal parties. This was desperate people with money and a desperate woman who needed money. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded and asked when they were going to meet. They met Megan for coffee the next week. When they came back, Rachel was glowing in a way I hadn't seen since the miscarriages started. "She's perfect," Rachel said. "Kind, smart. She really understands what we're going through. She has 2 kids of her own, so she knows what pregnancy is like. She's healthy, responsible, and she really wants to help us." They met with Megan several more times over the following weeks. Introduced her to us at one of our Sunday dinners. I remember being struck by how young she looked. 32, but you could have guessed 25. Dark hair, dark eyes, nervous smile. Her children, Oliver and Sophie, 9 and 6, had stayed home with a sitter. But Megan talked about them a lot. How Oliver struggled in school because of his illness. How Sophie was a little firecracker who wanted to be a veterinarian. How hard it was raising them alone after her husband left. She didn't go into details about the ex-husband, and I didn't ask, but I gathered he'd left when Oliver got sick. Some men do that run when things get hard. Megan had been carrying that burden alone, and she was willing to carry another burden, literally, to help her children, to get Oliver the treatment he needed, to give Sophie a stable home. When I looked at it that way, the arrangement started to make sense. This wasn't exploitation. This was mutual aid. We needed what she could give. She needed what we could give. Everyone benefited. A baby would be born into a loving family. Megan's kids would get the help they needed. Nathan and Rachel would finally become parents. Patricia and I would finally become grandparents. It seemed so simple then. The lawyers drew up the contract in May, 37 pages of legal language that I read 3 times trying to understand. The basic terms were straightforward. Megan would undergo IVF using embryos created from Rachel's eggs and Nathan's sperm. She would carry the pregnancy to term. At birth, she would relinquish all parental rights. Nathan and Rachel would become the legal parents from the moment of birth. In exchange, Megan would receive $45,000 in compensation paid in installments throughout the pregnancy. All medical expenses would be covered. She would also receive a monthly allowance for pregnancy-related costs like maternity clothes and additional nutrition. If complications arose requiring bed rest, lost wages would be compensated. The contract also spelled out what would happen in various scenarios. If pregnancy didn't occur, they would try again up to 3 times. If Megan miscarried, she would receive partial compensation and the option to try again. If the baby was born with serious health problems, Nathan and Rachel would still be obligated to take custody. There was one clause I kept coming back to. If Megan changed her mind after birth, the contract would be enforced according to Ohio law. The lawyer assured Nathan and Rachel this was a formality, that gestational surrogacy contracts are upheld in Ohio, that Megan had no genetic connection to the child, and therefore no legal standing to claim parental rights. But I noticed the lawyer didn't say it was impossible for Megan to challenge the contract. He said it was unlikely, that courts generally side with intended parents in gestational surrogacy cases. Generally. Usually. Most of the time. Not always. The IVF process began in June 2019. Rachel's egg retrieval yielded 12 viable eggs. 10 of them fertilized successfully with Nathan's sperm. Of those 10 embryos, 6 were healthy enough for transfer. 2 embryos were transferred to Megan on July 15, 2019. Patricia marked the date on our kitchen calendar with a little heart. "Transfer day," she wrote in her neat handwriting. 2 weeks later, the blood test came back positive. Megan was pregnant. The first ultrasound confirmed 1 heartbeat. 1 baby, strong and healthy. Estimated due date, early April 2020. We fell into a routine over the following months. Megan joined us for Sunday dinners regularly. She shared updates about every doctor's visit, every milestone. Nathan and Rachel went with her to most appointments. Saw the first ultrasound images, heard the heartbeat, watched the baby grow week by week. Patricia and I saw Megan at least once a week, sometimes more. She had almost no family of her own. Mother died when Megan was in her 20s. Father was absent. Only sister lived in California. She seemed to appreciate having people around who cared about the pregnancy, who cared about her. I started noticing things during those dinners. Small things at first. The way Megan's hand would rest on her belly while she talked. The way she smiled when the baby kicked. The way she started referring to the baby as she instead of it after they learned the sex at 20 weeks. It was a girl. Nathan and Rachel were overjoyed, started picking out names, decorating the nursery in soft pinks and yellows, settled on Hope. Because she represents hope, Rachel said. Hope after all these years of despair. Megan was there when they announced the name. I watched her face carefully. She smiled and said how beautiful it was. But something flickered in her eyes, something I couldn't quite read. After dinner that night, I found Megan alone in the kitchen, washing dishes, even though I'd told her a dozen times that guests in my house don't wash dishes. She was crying quietly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she scrubbed a pot. "Megan, are you okay?" She startled, nearly dropping the pot. "Oh, David, sorry, I didn't hear you come in." "What's wrong?" She shook her head, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Nothing. Hormones. You know how it is. Pregnancy makes you emotional." I didn't push. Maybe I should have. But I told myself it was just hormones, like she said. Pregnancy does that to women. Patricia used to cry at commercials when she was pregnant with Nathan. It's normal. It's fine. But I started watching Megan more closely, and I started noticing more. She talked to the baby, not just absent-mindedly, the way pregnant women sometimes do, but in actual conversations. I overheard her once in the backyard, thinking she was alone. She was sitting on the porch swing, hand on her belly, murmuring softly. "I know you can hear me," she was saying. "They say babies can hear voices from inside, so I want you to know my voice. I want you to know that I love you, that I'll always love you no matter what happens." My heart clenched when I heard that. No matter what happens. What did she think was going to happen? I told myself it meant nothing. She was just bonding with the baby, the way surrogates do. It was even healthy. Better for the baby to have a calm, loving environment in the womb. The attachment would fade after birth. That's what all the books said. That's what the lawyer said. That's what Nathan and Rachel believed. I wanted to believe it too. But some small part of me, the engineer who had spent his life anticipating structural failures, that part knew something was wrong. Something was building that we couldn't see. Something that would eventually collapse. The holidays that year were the happiest our family had seen in nearly a decade. By Christmas, Megan was 7 months pregnant, huge, moving slowly but glowing. She brought Oliver and Sophie to our Christmas dinner. The kids were sweet but wary. They knew the mother was carrying a baby for another family. Sophie kept asking when the baby would come out. Could she see her? Would she be her sister? Megan explained gently, probably for the 100th time, that no, the baby would live with Nathan and Rachel. She would be their daughter, not Sophie's sister. Sophie's face fell. "But the baby's in your tummy, Mommy. That makes her my sister." Megan's voice wavered when she answered, "It's complicated, sweetie. The baby has different parents. I'm just helping them." "Like a babysitter?" "Something like that, yes." Oliver, who was 9 and understood more than his sister, said nothing. But he watched Nathan and Rachel with something that looked like resentment. After dinner, I found Megan alone again. This time she was in the living room looking at the photos on the mantel. Baby pictures of Nathan, school photos, wedding photos. "You have a beautiful family," she said when she heard me approach. "Thank you. I always wanted this." She gestured at the photos, the house, the life they represented. Growing up, my family was broken. My parents fought constantly until my dad left. My mom was depressed, could barely take care of herself, let alone me. I used to dream about being part of a family like this. I'm sorry. Don't be. It is what it is. She stopped, hand on her belly. "I want more for my kids. That's why I'm doing this. To give Oliver and Sophie the life I never had. Stability, security, good medical care. They're lucky to have you as their mother." She turned to face me, and I saw tears in her eyes. Am I a good mother, David? Sometimes I wonder. A good mother wouldn't give away her baby. "This isn't your baby," I said gently but firmly. "It's Nathan and Rachel's baby. You're giving them the greatest gift anyone can give." Megan nodded, but she didn't look convinced. "The greatest gift? Yes, that's what everyone says. I should have told Nathan about this conversation, should have raised an alarm. But what would I have said? The surrogate seems emotionally attached? That was supposed to be normal. All the books said surrogates bond with the babies they carry. What mattered was what happened after birth. Megan had done this before. She knew the drill. She would let go when the time came. That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. January brought complications. Megan's blood pressure started rising, and the doctors diagnosed mild preeclampsia. Not serious enough for immediate delivery, but concerning. She was put on bed rest and told to monitor for warning signs carefully. The bed rest was hard on her. She couldn't work, which meant no income beyond the surrogacy payments. Couldn't chase after Sophie or help Oliver with homework without exhausting herself. Nathan and Rachel stepped up, visited Megan almost daily, brought groceries, helped around the house, drove the kids to activities when they could, hired a part-time nanny to help during the hours when Megan needed to rest and the kids needed supervision. I stopped by a few times, too. Megan's apartment was small, cramped, cluttered with children's toys and medical supplies. The neighborhood wasn't the best. I started worrying about her, about Oliver and Sophie, about whether this was a safe environment for a high-risk pregnancy. One afternoon, while Rachel was driving Sophie to a birthday party and Nathan was helping Oliver with a science project, I sat with Megan in her living room. She was lying on the couch, feet up, looking exhausted. "Thank you," she said, "for everything your family is doing." "It's nothing. You're carrying our grandchild. It's the least we can do." "She kicks at night," Megan said. "When I'm trying to sleep, around midnight, she starts doing somersaults. Nathan was the same. Patricia used to complain he was training to be a soccer player." Megan laughed softly. Sophie was like that. Oliver was quiet, barely moved. I worried something was wrong, but he was just calm, content. She was quiet for a moment, her hand moving in slow circles over her belly. "Can I tell you something, David? Something I haven't told Nathan and Rachel?" My heart sank. "Of course." "I talk to her every night, the baby. Before I fall asleep, I tell her about my day, about Oliver and Sophie, about my mother who died before I could give her grandchildren, about the life she's going to have with her real parents, how much they love her, how much they wanted her, how lucky she is. That's lovely, Megan. But sometimes," she stopped, struggling with something, "sometimes I pretend she's mine, just for a few minutes. I imagine that when she's born, I get to keep her, that I'll nurse her, watch her grow, be there for her first steps and first words. I know it's wrong. I know she's not mine. But I can't help it. She's inside me. She's made from my blood and my body. She's been listening to my voice for 7 months. How am I supposed to just give her away? I didn't know what to say. Every instinct told me to reassure her, remind her of the contract, tell her this was what she signed up for. But looking at her face, at the raw pain in her eyes, I couldn't bring myself to. "This must be incredibly difficult," I finally said. "You don't understand. You can't understand. Nobody can unless they've done it. The first time, with that other couple, I thought I could handle it, and I did. I gave them the baby, went home, and cried for a month. But I survived. Told myself the second time would be easier. I knew what to expect. I knew the emotional cost. And I was wrong. It's harder, so much harder. Because this time, I know Nathan and Rachel. I've had dinner with you. I've watched them prepare the nursery. I've seen Rachel's face when she feels the baby kick. They're not just clients. They're almost like family. Her voice broke on the last word, and that makes it harder to give her up. It makes it impossible to give her up and walk away. That's what I did before. Gave the baby to that couple and never saw them again. Clean break. That's what the books recommend. Don't try to maintain contact. Don't try to keep the relationship going. It's too confusing for everyone. But with Nathan and Rachel, they want me in her life. They've said so. They want Hope to know who carried her. They want her to have a relationship with my kids, because they're technically her. I don't know what they are. Half-siblings, womb siblings. There's no word for it. I thought about this. It had seemed so generous when Nathan first mentioned it. They wouldn't cut Megan out of the baby's life. They would stay in touch. They would let Hope know her origins. But now, I saw the other side. How could Megan let go if she was constantly being reminded of what she'd lost? How could she move on if she was going to see the baby grow up with another family? Have you talked to Nathan and Rachel about how you're feeling? Megan shook her head. I can't. They've been through so much. You've all been through so much. If I tell them I'm having second thoughts, it will destroy them, and I'm not having second thoughts. Not exactly. I know I have to give her up. I know I signed a contract. I know it's the right thing to do. But I don't know how I'm going to survive it. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I did something I would question 1,000 times afterward. I reached out and took her hand. You're an incredibly strong woman, Megan. What you're doing for my son and his wife, there are no words for it. But you matter too. Your feelings matter. If you need support, if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Patricia is here. You don't have to carry this burden alone. She squeezed my hand and started crying, and I held her hand and let her cry. And I didn't tell Nathan about any of it. That was my first betrayal, if you want to call it that. The first time I chose Megan's feelings over my son's right to know what was happening. I told myself I was being compassionate. Told myself Megan would work through her feelings and everything would be fine. Told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. Maybe I was right. Maybe I was wrong. I still don't know. February was tense. Megan's preeclampsia worsened slightly, and the doctors started talking about possible early induction. Nathan and Rachel were simultaneously excited and terrified. Every day the baby stayed inside was good for her development. But every day also increased the risk to Megan's health. On February 28th, Megan's blood pressure spiked dangerously. She was rushed to the hospital. Nathan and Rachel met her there. Patricia and I followed as soon as we got the call. The doctors decided to induce labor. The baby was 35 weeks, technically premature, but developed enough to survive without major complications. The risk of waiting any longer was too high. Labor lasted 18 hours. Nathan and Rachel were in the delivery room with Megan. The hospital allowed it, given the surrogacy arrangement. Patricia and I waited outside, pacing the halls, sipping bad coffee, trying to stay calm. At 3:47 a.m. on March 1st, 2020, my granddaughter was born. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, healthy, strong, perfect. Nathan came out to tell us. He was crying, laughing, shaking with emotion. "She's here," he kept saying. "She's finally here. She's beautiful. She's perfect. She's ours." We hugged. We cried. We took pictures. We called everyone we knew to share the news. For a few hours, everything was perfect. And then Megan refused to sign the papers. The hospital protocol for surrogacy births included a consent form the surrogate was supposed to sign, acknowledging that she was transferring custody to the biological parents. It wasn't strictly legally necessary. The contract covered all of that. But it was standard practice. A formality, the lawyer said. Megan was supposed to sign it within 24 hours of birth. But when the social worker brought her the forms, Megan asked for more time. Then more time. Then she stopped responding to questions about it entirely. Nathan was telling me all this in fragments, pacing our kitchen like a caged animal. Rachel was still at the hospital, with the baby wouldn't leave, wouldn't let hope out of her sight, terrified that someone was going to take her. "She's just emotional," Nathan said, and I couldn't tell if he was trying to convince me or himself. "It's hormones. Postpartum. She'll sign tomorrow. And if she doesn't, she will. She has to. There's a contract." "Nathan, don't, Dad. Don't say what you're about to say. This is our daughter, mine and Rachel's. Megan knows that. She agreed to this. She's not going to throw it all away because of a hormonal moment." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe it was temporary, that Megan would come to her senses, that the contract would hold. But I kept thinking about those conversations we'd had, about the way she talked about the baby, the way she cried when she thought no one was watching. On the third day after the birth, Megan's lawyer sent a letter to Nathan and Rachel's lawyer. The letter stated that Megan was invoking her right to a 72-hour waiting period before making any final decisions about relinquishment. Her lawyer argued that she had not been provided adequate independent legal counsel before signing the original surrogacy contract, and that her consent had been obtained under economic duress. In plain English, Megan was challenging the contract. She wanted to keep the baby. Nathan's reaction was volcanic. I had never seen my son so angry, not even during the worst of the miscarriages. He screamed at the lawyers, threatened lawsuits, talked about calling the police. Rachel went into a kind of shock, barely able to speak or eat. The hospital, caught in the middle, made a temporary decision. The baby would remain in the NICU under observation. She still needed monitoring due to her premature birth, and both parties would be given supervised visitation rights while the court sorted things out. That night, I drove to the hospital alone. I didn't tell Nathan where I was going. I told Patricia I needed some air. I found Megan in her room. She'd been moved to a different wing after delivery, away from the maternity ward. She looked terrible, pale, exhausted, hooked up to monitors tracking her still elevated blood pressure. "David." She didn't look surprised to see me. "I thought you'd come." "Megan, what are you doing?" "I can't give her up." Her voice was flat, defeated. "I really tried. When she was born and they put her on my chest, I felt it, David. That feeling everyone talks about. The bond, the love. It wasn't supposed to happen. Everyone said gestational surrogates don't bond the same way because there's no genetic connection. But they were wrong. She grew inside me for 9 months. She's made from my body. She's mine. She's not yours. Legally, genetically, she's Nathan and Rachel's child. I know what the law says. I know what the DNA says. But I'm her mother. I felt her move. I talked to her every night. I gave her my blood, my breath, my body. How can anyone tell me I'm not her mother?" I sank into the chair beside her bed. "What do you want, Megan? What's the end game here?" "I don't know. I just know I can't sign those papers. I can't give her away and never see her again. I can't spend the rest of my life wondering what she looks like, what her voice sounds like, whether she's happy. I thought I could. I've done it before. But this is different." "Why is this different?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because your family made me feel like I mattered. That other couple, they were nice, but distant. They paid me, thanked me, took the baby, and left. It hurt, but I could rationalize it. I was a service provider. They were clients. The baby was a product. And with us? With you, I was family. You invited me to dinner every week. You asked about my kids. You built a crib with your own hands. Patricia knitted a blanket. Rachel held my hand during contractions and said she loved me. How am I supposed to give my daughter to people I love? How am I supposed to see her at birthdays and holidays and pretend I'm just some nice lady who helped bring her into the world? I understood then, with horrible clarity, that our kindness had made things worse. We'd tried so hard to include Megan, to treat her like family, to make the surrogacy a partnership rather than a transaction. And in doing so, we'd made it impossible for her to let go. The very thing that made us feel like good people was destroying this arrangement. Our generosity, our warmth, our inclusion, all of it had blurred the lines that needed to stay sharp. "What are you asking for, Megan? What would make this okay?" "I don't know." She was crying now, quietly. "I thought maybe shared custody. Some arrangement where she has 2 families, where I can still be her mother, just not her only mother." "That's not what Nathan and Rachel signed up for." "I know, but I didn't sign up for this either. I signed up thinking I could handle it. I was wrong. Does that mean I should lose my daughter?" "She's not your daughter." Megan looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Grief, rage, desperation, all mixed together. "Then whose daughter is she, David? Who sang to her every night for 9 months? Who felt her kicking through the skin of my belly? Who did she know before anyone else in the world? Nathan is a name on a piece of paper. Rachel is a name on a piece of paper. I am her mother. My body was her first home. My heartbeat was the first sound she ever heard." I had no answer for her, because she was right, and so were Nathan and Rachel. Everyone was right. Everyone had legitimate claims. And there was only one baby. The legal battle that followed was the ugliest thing I've ever witnessed. And I've seen ugly things in my life: bridge collapses, construction accidents, the aftermath of hurricanes and floods, but nothing compared to watching 2 families tear each other apart over a baby who was too small to understand any of it. Nathan and Rachel's lawyer argued that the contract was clear and enforceable. Megan had entered into the agreement voluntarily, had been compensated for her services, and had no legal standing to claim parentage of a child she wasn't genetically related to. They cited precedents from other states where gestational surrogacy contracts had been upheld, emphasized that Rachel was the biological mother, that the child was conceived from her egg, and therefore had the genetic connection that superseded any claim Megan might make based on gestation alone. Megan's lawyer, a young woman from a nonprofit that advocates for surrogate rights, working pro bono, argued the opposite. That Ohio surrogacy law was murky at best, that the contract had been signed under economic duress, and that Megan's fundamental rights as a birth mother superseded any contractual agreement. They cited cases where surrogates had successfully challenged contracts, particularly in states with weak surrogacy legislation, argued that 9 months of carrying a child created a bond as significant as genetic connection, if not more so. Both sides brought in experts. Psychologists testified about maternal bonding. Ethicists debated the morality of surrogacy contracts. Medical specialists argued about the relative importance of genetic versus gestational parentage. I sat through most of the hearings. Nathan didn't want me there at first. He was still furious that I'd visited Megan in the hospital without telling him. But Patricia convinced him that we needed to show a united family front. And eventually, he relented. The hearings were brutal. Both lawyers went for blood. Nathan and Rachel's lawyer painted Megan as a mercenary who'd reneged on a business deal when she decided she wanted more, implied that Megan was mentally unstable, that her attachment to the baby was pathological. Megan's lawyer painted Nathan and Rachel as wealthy elitists who had treated a working-class single mother as a commodity, emphasized the power imbalance in the relationship, the fact that Megan had desperately needed money for her son's medical care. Neither characterization was fair, but that's how courts work. They reduce complex people to simple narratives that serve one side or the other. The baby, whom Nathan and Rachel called Hope and Megan called Lily, was placed in temporary foster care while the case was decided. Neither side would have custody until there was an outcome. Both were given supervised visitation rights. Those visits were heartbreaking to witness. I went with Nathan and Rachel to a few. The baby was so tiny, so unaware of the battle being waged over her. She smiled at whoever held her, didn't know the difference between genetic parents and the woman who had carried her. To her, they were all just faces and voices and warm arms. Megan came to visits, too, on different days. I never saw her there, but I heard from the social worker. Apparently, Megan sang to the baby, the same song she'd sung during pregnancy. The baby would calm immediately when she heard Megan's voice. She recognized it. She'd been listening to it for 9 months before she was even born. The social worker noted this in her report to the court. She wrote that the baby showed significant attachment response to the gestational carrier and recommended this bond be considered in any custody determination. Nathan was furious when he read that. "She's a baby," he said. "She'll attach to whoever takes care of her. That's what babies do. It doesn't mean Megan is her mother." But I could see the fear beneath his anger. What if the court decided that gestational bonds mattered more than genetics? What if they lost their daughter to the woman they'd hired to carry her? The case dragged on for months. Then, in July, there was an unexpected turn. The judge announced she wanted to hear testimony from family members, not the baby, obviously, but Oliver and Sophie from Megan's side, and since Nathan and Rachel had no other children, the judge wanted to hear from extended family members who could speak to the biological parent's fitness to raise a child. Which is how I ended up on the witness stand. Nathan's lawyer prepped me for hours. We went over every possible question I might be asked, every angle the other side might use. She coached me on how to present myself, how to speak clearly and confidently, how to avoid saying anything that could be used against us. What she didn't prep me for was Megan's lawyer asking me about the hospital visit. "Mr. Morrow, you visited Ms. Lawson in the hospital 3 days after the birth. Is that correct?" I glanced at Nathan. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "Yes." "And during that visit, Ms. Lawson expressed her feelings to you about the baby?" Yes, she did." "Can you describe those feelings for the court?" I hesitated. This was the moment when I could protect my son, could downplay the conversation, say I didn't remember the details, claim Megan was emotional but not specific. Nathan's lawyer had prepped me for this possibility. If asked about emotional conversations, be vague. You're not obligated to provide evidence against your own family. But I was under oath, and more than that, I had been asked a direct question about something I remembered in vivid detail. To lie would be perjury. It would also be a betrayal of Megan, who had trusted me with her feelings. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard her voice asking, "Am I a good mother, David?" I took a breath. Megan told me she loved the baby, that she'd talked to her every night throughout the pregnancy, that she felt a bond she hadn't expected to feel, that she didn't know how she was going to survive giving her up. The courtroom went very quiet. I could feel Nathan's eyes on me. Did Ms. Lawson use the word mother to describe her relationship with the baby? Yes, she said she was the baby's mother. And what was your response? I told her the baby wasn't hers. Legally and genetically, I mean. She was Nathan and Rachel's daughter. How did Ms. Lawson respond to that? I paused again. This next part was the hardest. She said she knew what the law said. She knew what the DNA said. But she felt like a mother anyway, because she had carried the baby, felt her move, given her blood and breath and body. She asked me how anyone could tell her she wasn't a mother. "And did you have an answer for her, Mr. Morrow?" I looked at Megan, sitting at the defendant's table. She was watching me with those dark, tired eyes. Looked at Nathan and Rachel, holding hands so tightly their knuckles were white. Looked at the judge, waiting for my answer. "No," I said finally. "I didn't have an answer, because it's an incredibly complex situation with no easy solutions." Nathan's lawyer tried to do damage control on cross-examination, asked about my relationship with my son, about my belief in the validity of the contract, about my confidence in Nathan and Rachel's fitness as parents. I answered all her questions honestly. Yes, I believed Nathan and Rachel would be wonderful parents. Yes, I believed they had a legitimate claim to the child. Yes, I wanted my granddaughter raised by my son. But the damage was done. I had acknowledged under oath that the situation was complicated, that there was no obvious right answer, that both sides had legitimate claims and legitimate grief. After my testimony, Nathan wouldn't look at me. He sat rigid in his seat until court adjourned for the day, then left without speaking to me. Rachel followed him, casting me a look that mixed pain with something that might have been understanding. Patricia took my hand as we walked to the car. "You did the right thing," she said. "Did I?" "You told the truth. That's always right. Even if it costs us our granddaughter." She didn't have an answer for that. The judge took 2 months to issue a ruling. 2 months of waiting, of silence from Nathan, of sleepless nights and endless second-guessing. I replayed my testimony over and over in my head. Had I betrayed my son? Had I given Megan's lawyer the ammunition they needed to take hope from us? Or had I simply told the truth about an impossible situation? In late August, the ruling came down. The judge rejected Megan's claim for full custody. She ruled that the gestational surrogacy contract was legally binding, that Megan had been adequately informed of its terms, and that despite her financial struggles, there wasn't sufficient evidence of coercion to void the agreement. Nathan and Rachel were named Hope's legal parents. But there was more. The judge also ruled that Megan would be granted visitation rights. Not custody, but a structured visitation schedule that acknowledged the unique role of the gestational carrier in the child's life and the demonstrated emotional bond between the infant and Ms. Lawson. Megan would get 1 day per month with Hope, supervised at first, then unsupervised as the child grew older. The visits would continue until Hope turned 18, unless there was evidence of harm. The judge wrote in her ruling, "This court acknowledges that modern reproductive technologies create complexities not fully addressed by existing law. While genetic parentage remains the primary legal standard, this court also recognizes the reality of gestational bonding. The child at the center of this case spent 9 months listening to Ms. Lawson's voice, responding to her movements, dependent on her body for life. To ignore that bond would be to ignore the reality of the child's experience. Therefore, in the best interests of the child, this court orders that Ms. Lawson, while not a legal parent, shall have an ongoing relationship with the child she carried." Nathan was devastated. He'd won custody, but not the clean victory he'd wanted. He'd wanted Megan out of their lives forever, wanted to raise his daughter without the constant reminder of the woman who had challenged his right to be her father. Megan was devastated too. She kept a connection to her baby, but lost the chance to be her mother in the full sense. Wouldn't wake her every morning, wouldn't put her to bed every night, wouldn't be there for first steps unless they happened to fall on her visitation day. No one got what they wanted. Everyone got something they hadn't expected. And me? I got something I never anticipated. I got the blame. Nathan called me the night the ruling came down. It was the first time he'd spoken to me since my testimony. "This is partly your fault," he said. His voice was cold, controlled, but I could hear the rage beneath it. "Your testimony. It gave the judge the justification for this ruling. You acknowledged the situation was complicated, that Megan had legitimate feelings. You gave her exactly what she needed." "Nathan, I didn't. You told the truth." "Yes, I know. You said that already. But whose truth were you serving, Dad, mine or Megan's?" "I was serving the truth as I saw it, that this was an impossible situation with no good answers." "There was a good answer. The contract, the law. We did everything right. We hired lawyers, we signed papers, we paid money. And now we have to share our daughter with a woman who tried to steal her." "She didn't try to steal her. She—" "Don't tell me what she felt." His voice finally cracked, years of pent-up anger breaking loose. I don't care what she felt. Rachel and I went through hell. 8 years of torture, 6 dead babies, thousands of dollars, endless pain. And when we finally found a way to become parents, when there was finally hope, Megan decided she wanted to be a mother too. Nathan, I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear about how hard it was for Megan. You know what was hard? Sitting in a hospital room holding Rachel while she miscarried our baby for the 6th time. That was hard, and you should have been on our side. You should have supported us. Instead, you supported the woman who was destroying our family. I didn't support her. I just told the judge she had a right to be our daughter's mother. Yes, I know what you said. I was there. He hung up. I sat in the darkness of my study an hour later, holding the phone, staring at the bridge blueprints on the walls. My whole life, I'd been a problem solver. I calculated loads and stresses, found ways to make things work, even when it seemed impossible. But this, I couldn't solve. Couldn't engineer my way out of it. Couldn't build a bridge across the chasm that had divided my family. Patricia found me there at midnight. She didn't say anything, just sat down next to me and took my hand. "He'll forgive you," she said finally. "Will he? He's your son. You're his father. You'll find your way back to each other." I wanted to believe her, but sitting in that dark room, my son's accusations still ringing in my ears, I wasn't sure of anything. The next year was the hardest of my life. Nathan didn't take my calls, didn't respond to texts. Christmas came and went without him. Then New Year's. Then Hope's birthday, her first birthday, which I missed. Patricia stayed in touch with them. Nathan couldn't cut off his own mother. She visited them once a week, helped with Hope, listened as Nathan and Rachel adjusted to parenthood with the shadow of Megan's upcoming visits hanging over them. Megan's first visit happened in October 2020, when Hope was 7 months old. Patricia told me about it, how Megan cried when she held the baby for the first time in months, how Hope calmed immediately at the sound of her voice, how Nathan watched from the corner of the room with a face like stone. I didn't see Megan either. She called a few times in the months after the ruling, but I didn't answer. Couldn't. Every time I heard her voice, I heard Nathan's accusations. You were on her side. You betrayed us. I started seeing a therapist in November, a woman my age with a soft voice and sharp eyes. She made me talk about things I'd never spoken aloud, about being an absent father, about the guilt I'd carried throughout Nathan's life, about how the surrogacy had seemed like a chance to finally get it right, to be there for my son when he needed me most. "And now you feel you let him down again," she said. "I let him down. That's not a feeling, it's a fact. You told the truth under oath. That's letting him down?" The truth I told cost him full custody of his daughter. Did it cost him full custody? It gave him full custody, but not complete isolation from Megan, which seems to be what he wanted. Yes. The therapist leaned back in her chair, studying me. "David, let me ask you something. Do you believe the judge made the wrong decision?" I thought about that for a long time. No. I think she made the only possible decision in an impossible situation. "Then how did you let your son down?" "I was honest when he needed me to be loyal." "And you think honesty and loyalty are opposites?" "In this case, yes." She shook her head. "I think in this case, they were the same thing. You were loyal to your son by telling the truth. You didn't let him build his life on a lie. He may not see that now. He may never see it, but that doesn't make it any less true." I wasn't sure I believed her, but her words stayed with me. The next spring, Megan finally got through to me. I answered because the therapist had suggested that avoidance wasn't a solution. David, her voice was quiet, tentative. I need to talk to you. We met at a park, neutral territory. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her, healthier, calmer, though there was still a sadness in her eyes that I don't think will ever fully leave. I want to apologize, she said. For what? For putting you in this position, for making you choose between me and your family. I didn't mean for that to happen. You didn't make me choose. I made the choice myself. And you lost your son because of it. I couldn't deny it. Yes. Megan was quiet for a while, watching children play on the nearby playground. I'm seeing a therapist. She's helping me work through all of this, understand why I couldn't let go. And what have you understood? That I have attachment issues because of my childhood, that when I got pregnant with Hope, it triggered all these deep-seated needs I didn't know I had. I bonded with her in ways I never bonded with my own mother. That makes sense. But it doesn't excuse it. I hurt a lot of people. You, Patricia, Nathan, Rachel, even Hope, probably. She's going to grow up with such a strange situation because I couldn't do what I promised. Megan, my therapist says I need to forgive myself, but I don't know how. I look at Hope during our visits, and she's so happy with Nathan and Rachel. She calls Rachel Mommy, as she should. Rachel is her mom. I don't know what I am to her. You're important to her, too. The social worker said she responds to your voice, that she calms down when you sing to her. For now, yes. But what about when she grows up? When she's old enough to ask questions? How do I explain that I carried her but I'm not her mother? That I love her but I gave her away? I had no answers for her, only my own questions. We talked for an hour, two lost souls trying to make sense of the wreckage of an impossible situation. When we parted, Megan hugged me. Thank you, David, for being honest, for seeing me as a person instead of just a problem to be solved. I watched her walk away and thought about what my therapist had said, about honesty and loyalty, about a truth that cost relationships but remained true. Anyway, the breakthrough with Nathan came in June 2021, 15 months after the court ruling. Patricia called me at work. I was still consulting on bridge projects, couldn't fully retire, and told me to come to Nathan's house immediately. When I arrived, Nathan was alone. Rachel had taken Hope to visit her mother for the day. He met me at the door, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in over a year. Not anger, not resentment, exhaustion. Come in, Dad. We sat in his living room, a room I'd only seen once before, on that brief visit before everything fell apart. Baby toys were scattered across the floor. Pictures of Hope covered the walls. I've been seeing a therapist, Nathan said abruptly. That's good. Rachel insisted. After the ruling, I was so angry at everyone. Megan, you, the judge, the situation. I was taking it out on everyone, on Rachel, on Hope. I didn't want to be that person. I understand. My therapist is helping me work through it, understand things I didn't understand before. He paused, clearly struggling with what to say, like why Megan did what she did. My therapist says that the maternal bond is a powerful biological process, that Megan's attachment wasn't a choice, wasn't a scheme, it was just nature. That's true, and I'm starting to understand why you testified the way you did. You weren't trying to hurt me. You were trying to acknowledge something that everyone else was pretending didn't exist. I felt a weight I'd been carrying for 15 months start to lift. Nathan, I'm not saying I forgive you, Dad. I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I'm saying I'm trying to understand, and I'm saying Hope has been asking about you. My heart leapt. She has? Patricia's been showing her pictures, telling her about you. Hope wants to meet her grandpa. I'd like that, more than anything. Nathan nodded slowly. Sunday dinner. Next Sunday. Come. I'll be there. Thank you, Nathan. He met my eyes for the first time since I'd walked in. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Hope. She deserves to know all her grandparents, even the ones who... He stopped, not finishing the sentence. Even the ones who betrayed her father. The words hung between us, unspoken, but understood. I understand, I said, and I'll take it on any terms. That Sunday dinner was the beginning of a slow, painful reconstruction of our relationship. Hope, now a year and 3 months old, was a delighted whirlwind of energy. She'd just started walking, toddling unsteadily across the room with a wide smile that showed 4 small teeth. She didn't remember me, of course, too young, but Patricia had laid the groundwork, showing her pictures, telling her stories. When Hope saw me, she pointed a chubby finger and said, "Grandpa." I picked her up, this tiny person who had caused such a storm, and she grabbed my beard with both hands and laughed, the simple, pure joy of a child who knew nothing about the complexity of her existence. Over dinner, Nathan and Rachel told me about how Megan's visits were going. They'd been strained at first, Nathan said. Megan would come with a social worker supervising, spend her allotted time with Hope, leave. Nobody talked more than necessary, but slowly, very slowly, it was becoming less hostile. Rachel was the one who reached out first, Nathan said, glancing at his wife. She saw Megan crying after a visit and just talked to her, like one mother to another. Rachel shrugged, but I could see the emotion on her face. She loves Hope. I can see that. I can't blame her for loving my daughter. My therapist says we need to find a way to integrate Megan into Hope's life, Nathan continued. Not as a mother. Rachel is her mother, but as someone important, someone who was there from the beginning. That's generous of you, I said. It's not easy, Nathan admitted. Every time I see Megan with Hope, part of me is still angry, still resentful of what she put us through. But another part sees that Hope is happy, that she's not traumatized by any of this. She's too young to understand. But when she grows up, my therapist says it's better if all the adults in her life get along. I nodded, thinking of my own therapist, of conversations about honesty and loyalty. That sounds like wise advice. Over the following months, I slowly became part of Hope's life. Sunday dinners became regular. Sometimes Nathan would let me take her for a few hours and we'd go to the park, or I'd show her my workshop, letting her help with simple projects. She was a clever child, curious and affectionate. There was a stubborn streak in her that reminded me of Nathan, but also a tenderness that was pure Rachel. Looking at her, I could see the future of our family, Hope, after all the years of pain. I saw Megan only in glimpses. Sometimes our visits with Hope would overlap with hers. Nathan was careful to schedule us so we didn't cross paths often. We would exchange polite nods, a few words. It was awkward, but not hostile. Once, when Hope was 2, I arrived to pick her up just as Megan's visit was ending. Hope was in Megan's arms, head on her shoulder, almost asleep. "She's exhausted," Megan said softly. handing me the baby. We spent the whole day at the zoo. Sounds like fun. It was. She looked at Hope with an expression of such tenderness that my heart clenched. She talks about you, you know. Said her grandpa builds bridges. I showed her some pictures. Megan smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She's a happy child. Nathan and Rachel are doing a good job. So are you. She shook her head. I'm not her mother, David. The judge made that clear. I'm just, I don't know, an aunt, a family friend. You're a person who loves her. That matters, too. Tears filled her eyes. Not enough. I didn't know what to say to that, because she was right. It wasn't enough, but it was all she had. By Hope's 3rd birthday, things had settled into something resembling normalcy. Nathan still hadn't fully forgiven me. Maybe he never would. But we talked regularly. He asked my advice on home projects. I helped him build a playhouse in the backyard for Hope. Megan continued her monthly visits. Nathan and Rachel even invited her to Hope's birthday party, a gesture that I knew cost them a lot. I watched at that party as Hope moved between the adults in her life with ease, running to Rachel for comfort when she fell, to Nathan for play, to Megan to sing her favorite song, to me to show off a new toy. To her, this was all normal. She didn't know that her family structure was unusual, didn't know about the court battle, the tears, the pain that had brought us all to this moment. She just knew there were a lot of people who loved her, and maybe, as she grows up, that will be all that matters. Today, Hope is 6 years old. It's been 6 years since that night she was born, and everything changed. 6 years of slow healing, of careful rebuilding of trust, of accepting a reality that none of us chose but all of us had to live with. Nathan and I are on good terms now. Not the same as before the surrogacy. That's impossible. There will always be a scar between us from what happened. That moment when I chose truth over loyalty, or loyalty through truth, depending on how you look at it. But we've rebuilt on a new foundation, stronger, because now it's built on honesty rather than assumptions. Rachel is a wonderful mother. She's patient, loving, fiercely protective of Hope. She's also, in Nathan's view, more generous to Megan than he could ever be. She sees Megan not as a threat, but simply as another person who loves her daughter. For Rachel, love for Hope isn't a zero-sum game. The more people who love her daughter, the better. Megan has found a kind of peace, I think. Not happiness. I don't think she'll ever be completely happy with this arrangement. But acceptance. She sees Hope once a month, plus holidays and birthdays. They've established a ritual. Megan takes Hope to the same place every time, a small pizza place with a playground, and they spend the day together. Hope calls her Meggie. Not Mom, not Aunt, just Meggie. A special nickname for a special person. Recently, Hope asked me about Meggie. We were at the park feeding the ducks, and she turned to me with that serious expression children get when they're contemplating big questions. Grandpa, why do I have Meggie when other kids don't? I chose my words carefully. Nathan and Rachel have been careful about how they've told Hope about her origins, telling her the truth but gently, age-appropriately. Because you were inside Maggie's tummy before you were born, I said, but Mom and Dad gave you your start, so Meggie is special to you. Like a second mom? I hesitated. This was a question that neither Nathan nor Rachel nor Megan knew how to handle. Is Megan a mother, a non-mother, something in between? Who do you want her to be? I asked. Hope thought about it. Just Meggie. Meggie's special. And perhaps that's the best answer we'll ever get. I'm 73 years old. I've retired now, finally, after 45 years of designing bridges. The last project I completed was a pedestrian bridge across the river downtown. A light, elegant structure connecting two banks. I think a lot about bridges these days, about their purpose, about how they connect places that would otherwise be separated, about how they need to be strong enough to bear weight, but flexible enough to move with the wind, or else they'll break. That's what we've all learned, I think. How to be strong and flexible at the same time, how to carry the weight of an impossible situation without breaking under it. How to move when circumstances demand it, even when every instinct says to stay rigid. Nathan learned to share his daughter. Rachel learned to see Megan as an ally, not an enemy. Megan learned to love Hope from a distance, to accept the love she can get instead of the love she wants. And me? I learned that truth doesn't always make you popular. That honesty has a price. That sometimes doing the right thing means losing what's dear to you, at least for a while. But I also learned that families are more resilient than I thought. That love, even damaged love, can heal. That bridges, even broken ones, can be rebuilt if both sides are willing to work. In a few weeks, Hope graduates from kindergarten. We'll all be there, Nathan, Rachel, me, Patricia, Megan, even Oliver and Sophie. All the adults who love this little girl gathered to celebrate her. Will it be awkward? Probably. There's still tension. There's still pain. Scars don't disappear just because time passes. But we'll show up, all of us, because that's what you do for people you love. You show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. My therapist asked me in our last session if I regret anything, helping Nathan and Rachel find a surrogate, becoming friends with Megan, my testimony in court. I thought about it for a long time. I regret the pain, I finally said. I regret that Nathan and Rachel didn't get the simple, joyful path to parenthood they deserved. I regret that Megan feels the loss every day. I regret that Hope will grow up with questions about her unusual beginning. But I don't regret telling the truth, and I don't regret knowing Megan. She's a good person caught in an impossible situation, like all of us. The therapist smiled. That sounds like acceptance. Does it? What do you think? I thought about Hope, laughing on the swings, about Nathan teaching her to ride her bike with training wheels, about Rachel reading her bedtime stories, about Megan singing her the same song she sang when Hope was still in the womb. I thought about bridges, the ones I built from concrete and steel, and the ones I've tried to build between people. Yes, I said, I think so. I accept what happened. I accept that I can't change it. I accept the family we've become, even if it's not the family I imagined. And is that enough? It has to be. It's all I have. As I write this, I hear the sound of little feet running down the hall. Hope is here for her weekly visit. Patricia has been baking cookies, a tradition they started when Hope was 3. "Grandpa," Hope shouts, bursting into my study. "Grandma says the cookies are ready." I close the notebook, this careful account of the most difficult time of my life. My therapist suggested writing it all down, said it might help bring closure. I'm not sure I've found closure, but maybe I've found something just as important. Peace. "Let's go," I tell Hope, taking her hand. And together we walk toward the smell of fresh-baked cookies, Patricia's laughter, the simplicity of a moment that requires no explanations or justifications. Just Grandpa, Grandma, and granddaughter. Sometimes that's enough.